Thank you so much for coming out to the Graduate School of Journalism. We really appreciate you coming out. I'm Ken Light. I'm the Reva and David Logan Professor of Photojournalism here at the Journalism School. Tonight, we hope to talk about my work and my book, Course of the Empire, and our experiences of photographing the Republican and Democratic conventions this summer. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Wesaam Al-Badry, who is a 2020 graduate of our program, coming to us from San Francisco Art Institute. And I know there's a lot of SFAI folks in the crowd. He's a multi-talented photographer, filmmaker, and works in lots of different mediums. Every week that we talk on the phone like every day, if you can believe that, right? Like, what's up?
Yeah, that's it.
Like 2 minutes, 30 seconds, checking in. He hails from Lincoln, Nebraska. His wife and daughter are right here in the front row. Malia, good to see you. He's originally from Iraq, and he became a refugee and walked with his family to Saudi Arabia, and his family was then repatriated to Lincoln, Nebraska, of all places. Not bad, okay. Houses are cheap if you want to get a house, right? Turn your mic on. And he officially became a U.S. citizen this past summer, which we're very happy.
Yeah.
So they can't deport you.
Yeah, well, yeah, because you were afraid all the time.
I was.
Yeah.
I also want to give a shout out to Jared Stapp, who's
Right here.
Where are you?
Come on,
There you
it's
are,
right
Jared.
there.
who photographed the RNC with us, the DNC and the RNC,
Yep.
and we'll see later in the evening, we'll see some of Jared's photographs. Jared was a PhD student, so I should call him Dr. Jared Stapp, right? Because you paid a lot of money for that. He was a PhD student here at Berkeley when he came to me and asked if he could join my photo class, and I said yes, and he's a marvelous photographer. We've been friends and colleagues for 10 years now. We hope to share some of the insights and our thoughts about our empire and photographing the political moment. And
So I'm supposed to introduce my dear friend Ken. Can you guys hear me? So you guys all know Ken Light. His resume is longer than a Costco receipt, you know. So he's like, he's been around for 5 decades. You know, multiple books. I think a very, very important figure in the documentary world. That's one of the reasons I came to the J School. And, you know, it tells a lot about a person when he spends time with his former students covering conventions and we're sharing the same spaces. You know, you learn a lot about people. But yeah.
you do.
Yeah.
So he had a very messy room is all I can tell you.
That's fine, you know. So this is not a really a traditional way of having. I think because of our friendship and the way we speak, we wanted to keep it like not very formal, you know. I think sometimes we do all of these talks and everybody, so we're just gonna keep it open. So yeah, I'm really excited. I love this work, and I think because covering American politics for 5 decades, and you're going on your 6th now, so yeah.
Kind of scary. I also want to thank our amazing staff that made this possible. Leah Swindle, who's probably out there cleaning up, Marlena Telvik, Rick Johnson, who helped with the media part, our communications director, Andrea Lampros, who's right there taking pictures, for helping support tonight's events. And also the photo events wouldn't have been possible without the support of the Reva and David Logan Foundation, which supports a chair in photojournalism here at the Journalism School. Our student magazine, Realize, which has been published for 22 years here at the school, and the last printed magazine, which is really pretty amazing at a journalism school. Everything, of course, is digital now, but to have a printed publication is really wonderful. They've supported our hallway gallery and our photo book symposium, which we have every 2 years, and we'll be having it again this coming April. And I also wanted to thank my dear friend Jonathan Logan, who actually supported this room. We call it the LMC, the Logan Media Center room. And he's been a big and a huge supporter of my endeavors as well as the Journalism School. So he's not here, but he needs to be thanked. So we're going to start off talking about my book, Course of the Empire. Yeah, thanks for the lights. these are photographs from 2011 to 2020. And it really started with me thinking about, is our frontier anything but endless? And traveling across the country, you can see neighborhoods that feel like traveling between centuries, people living near abandoned factories, rights of way, heaped with abandoned appliances, years of neglect. And of course, then you see on the other side, the gilded age of this century, the stock market reaching new heights, CEOs are being paid mega salaries, expensive cars rushing out of showroom doors. The sheer magnitude of the gaps between the rich and the rest is often in plain sight, but it's so often unseen. The politicians and the media behave as if the poor don't exist. Are we doing anything about this? We seemingly turn away and don't look. I wonder if we're losing ourselves. So for 10 years, I crisscrossed across America to try and understand the American empire, working in different communities, traveling for weeks on end, driving around. And then I ended up putting together this book, and it was really a strange coincidence that the publisher Gerhard Steidl said, "Let's do this book." And then, if any of you know about him, his scheduling of books is bad. So he said, "Let's do it." And I had already spent 4 years working on this project, and then it took 5 years for him to end up doing the book, which actually worked great because it gave me 5 more years of photographing when things began to completely change, and we have the rise of Trumpism and Donald Trump at the convention in Cleveland. And so the book ended up being very large. It's 212 photographs, and I also have to thank Sandra Phillips, who's sitting here. I came to show her my work at the MoMA when she was curator there, and she gave me a lot of advice, like, this doesn't work, like, you need to rethink about it, which was wonderful. And also Erin O'Toole, who now runs the photo program at the MoMA. And I try to figure out, how do I put together that many photographs in a book and tell the story? And so it's divided into chapters. Taking all the photographs of 10 years of traveling and trying to figure out, what are the pieces? So the book starts off by kind of looking at the typography of America. How do I see America? What is it about? What's happening in the communities? Things like the hometown of Superman and a limousine driver in New York City, or on the road. And then the wealth, and I have to thank Judy Walgren, who's also here. Judy was the director of photography at the San Francisco Chronicle, and I called Judy and I said, "Hey, Judy, I want to get into the big opera ball. You have to, where people pay $10,000 a plate to go into the ball, and they're not going to let me in. Will you help me?" And Judy, I remember this so well. Judy said, "When is your book going to come out, Ken?" And I said, "I don't know, Judy, 5 or 6 years." She says, "Okay, I'll get you a credential." And I think by the time the book came out, Judy was gone. She moved on. So Judy got me credentialed, and this is the Opera Ball in San Francisco. And of course, one of the things you're thinking about are the contradictions of what's happening in the city at that time, and here people are paying $10,000 for dinner, and they feel like they're doing good work, and the city's falling apart even then. And how do you show it? And so part of the journey was meeting people, seeing things. The picture on the left is Miami Beach. And someone says, "Ken, you like the American flag?" And I'm always amazed, traveling, like, everywhere there's the American flag, and even in the strangest situations, you find people having the flag and the kind of symbol of America. This is Los Angeles. The second chapter is called Capital. And this is the photograph that ended up being the cover of the book. And this is one of the pictures you really like.
Well,
hold the microphone.
Have it turned off. So it's one of the 5 images that I picked, and I think it's very present of American politics right now. It's like America for sale, and I think it's like, for me, it was so simple, but it speaks volumes about like the politics of where we're at today. And that's pretty much what I wanted to ask you about. Like, what were you thinking, and what was the reason you made it?
Yeah, so I think part of looking at America is finding those moments that are unseen, that you pass by every day. And believe it or not, this was, as I said, in Los Angeles. I'm on the freeway, and this is often what happens. I'm driving around looking and seeing where I can stop and make photographs. And I'm driving on the freeway, and I see this giant balloon with this flag, and I'm like, what the hell? And it ends up, I'll probably ruin the picture for you, but it ends up being a car dealership. And I figure out how to get, in Los Angeles, it's not easy to get off the freeway, as many of you know. I figure out how to get off the freeway. Luckily, there's this big balloon, and I can kind of follow, drive towards the balloon. I pull into the car lot, and I get out of my car with my camera. And I start taking pictures, and of course, most of you have been to, a dealership, like 4 people attack you at once. Do you want to buy a car? I know, I'm just really interested in this balloon and the flag. Why? It just is representative of what I think is happening in America, that everything is for sale in America. And that's how this picture came about. And that's how a lot of the pictures come about, going to a place, waiting, timing often is important, getting permission. The picture on the left is a book party in New York City, and the picture on the right is in Wellington, Florida. And where the people fly in with 6 or 7 horses on their plane, an equestrian festival, pretty amazing. And then just looking for the small moments. This is the San Francisco Opera, and maybe I was the only one who thought the sign was really interesting. And as well, this is the San Francisco Opera. And then again, these moments in America. This is at Sotheby's, the sale of the Scream, which sold for, I believe it's $130 million. And this is the preview of the Scream. And there's a moment I came across, and I'm not sure if I have it in the slideshow, but out in the hallway, and someone mentioned it to me. There was a homeless encampment in San Francisco that I photographed, and they had a drawing of the Scream on the back of their encampment. And someone said, well, why don't you put them together, visually? And part of it is, well, it's too easy, to put them next to each other. The ideas in editing and sequencing is to have surprises, that people will see something and then something pops up, in a different chapter of the book or 10 pictures later, and all of a sudden they feel like they've discovered it, and they have discovered it. So in going out and photographing, looking for those moments. Chapter 3 is the heartland. So I'm traveling in Idaho, Nebraska, Kansas, and other parts of America. In fact, this is in Nebraska.
Yeah. So the reason for those crosses is most of the time that's where people die in car crashes. So there's like what they put up. So
A lot of
there's
car
a lot.
crashes.
Yeah, there's a lot, and you see them in a lot of places when you see multiple crosses. So that's, I assume, 3 people there.
This was July 4th in Nebraska. This is Bakersfield during the downturn when new homes were abandoned. And the Central Valley on the left and Mississippi on the right. And this is in Mississippi. An affair in Indiana. And sometimes, again, in traveling, and I know Wesaam knows this, you're driving and you're just looking, and all of a sudden something appears, and this was near the end of the day. I was really tired. I'd been photographing all day, and I'm driving to the motel where I'm going to stay, and all of a sudden I see a sign, County Fair. And wow, I'm a sucker for county fairs. And I pull in and just start wandering around. And these young girls were great. I mean, to me, they were a representative of how people see themselves in America. In Mississippi, on the left, cotton choppers hoeing and chopping the weeds behind in the field, and on the right, a guy in his bedroom. People say, "How do you get access to people? How do you get into this situation?" And you know, typically I just would pull into a community and start talking to people, and what are you up to? What's your life like? And so often, and I know Wesaam has this experience, we're photographing people who have very little voice, and most people are not interested in them. It's not like the New York Times or CBS is going to come talk to them and find out about their world. And then you show up and you're so interested in who they are and what their world is about. They just want to tell you their stories, and you listen to their stories. And as you're listening, of course, you're making photographs. And then in the case of this guy, he says, "Well, yeah, you know, come into my house." And then you start talking. You say, "Oh, is that your gun? Oh, yeah. Want to take a picture? Sure. Why not?" And of course, you know, the American flag and the Dodge flag is just, you know, I say the photo gods have given you that gift. It's just there.
Do you have to get release forms signed by these subjects?
I didn't get any release forms signed. No.
Yeah.
No.
I have few times, but it just depends on the project. If you keep just focusing on them, but it's getting tricky these days. It's like, you know, if you're working with editors, they want like release forms. But I always say if it's more documentary journalism, you don't. But if it's like a long-term project that you're gonna present it in multiple ways, then I usually make like the work I done in all over Appalachia. I made everybody sign because I know it's gonna go on billboards and other places.
Chapter 4 is Metropolis, and it looks at the big cities, Los Angeles, New York City. This is in the Bronx, a protest of the killing of a young man by the police. This is in Detroit. And in Houston, on the right is a homeless shelter, a man who's bipolar, and on the left is a guy in a crack den in Detroit. And this is shining the stars on Hollywood Boulevard. So again, you know, just being, oops. Okay. I'm talking to myself for the last 10 minutes. Just looking for those moments, wandering around. On the left was a murder in Detroit, and someone said, "Well, how did you get there?" Well, you know, I'm photographing in the inner city in Detroit, and I see a helicopter, and I just kind of drive to the helicopter as it's circling over, and someone had been murdered, and there was another reporter there, and the police refused to let us go on the other side of the yellow tape. And so this is the picture I made, is this young kids who are kind of standing there, knowing the victim. And on the right is Highland Hospital, visiting waiting room in Oakland. The New York City subway. Yes, and there's the scream. This is in San Francisco. Chapter 4 is disruption. Excuse me, chapter 5 is disruption. This is a hobo encampment. And again, you have to kind of trust the people that you're interacting with. And this was a situation where I was driving in Los Angeles, and I saw some people on the side of the freeway, like we all often see, holding up a sign wanting money. Excuse me. And I pulled over and started talking to a guy, and he says, "Oh, you want to see where we live?" And I'm like, "Sure." And then they take you into the woods, and of course you're like, "What have I gotten into?" I'm like, going with this person into the woods off of the freeway, and there was an encampment right by the railroad tracks where people would jump off on the train, and this guy just had this marvelous tattoo on his back, which I photographed. Times Square, New York City during the Occupy movement. This is during the many protests, and this is in Emeryville, Oakland. This is probably 1 o'clock in the morning as they're arresting people. There's even surveillance at the Statue of Liberty. And on the right is the border. Trump rally. This is the Republican convention in Cleveland. And this is the floor of the convention. This is the first time Trump was nominated. And this is when he accepted the nomination. And this is the Capitol. And it was just this moment in which I was, wow, they had plastic on it. They're doing some kind of work, but it really just said so much to me. Mm-hmm. Ben Franklin with like this plastic sheet over him, and at the time, what was happening in America. Chapter 6 is called Transformation. And this is when we're shifting from the Obama administration to Donald Trump. And on the right is the inauguration. And then the next day was, of course, the amazing Women's March. And we were there together for that.
Yep.
Yeah. Chapter 7 is the regime. And so this is the Comey hearings. You all may remember that. And Bernie Sanders in the Capitol. And this is right on the border, down by the Pacific Ocean. I think that was a picture that you were interested in.
Well, there was 5 of them, but I think this is the second one in.
Yeah.
And this whole idea of America putting up fences. So for me, that spoke very, like, literally, it's like everything that you hear about me being, refugee and immigrant, and this whole idea of immigrants or refugees coming in to destroy, to take. And the reality is that refugees and immigrants come here to build, come here to work, and come here to, make America what it is. Because a lot of time, people like us, I was us until a month ago, but it's like the reality is that you do so much work, so much work and so much, and you never get the recognition. And all these families, I remember my family when we were in a refugee camp, always fenced off with barbed wire too, right? And you're always looking out. And this situation is like you're looking in, and nothing really. For me, that is one of my favorite images of yours. So that probably I want to print. That's what I'm saying.
You want to print. He always wants a print.
Also, Wesaam, doesn't this tie into the work you were doing in the valley?
About farm workers. Well, yeah, I think I was in the J school here working. Yeah. And a lot of time people, for years or 2 years, I worked in Central Valley. And what happens, a lot of people, during the lockdown, a lot of farm workers showed up to work. They were essential workers, so they had to show up every day with no mask, no protections. People were dying. And ICE put a pause on picking people up because they needed them so bad. But after everything went back in, they went back into the raids. And everybody I spoke with, they can't afford to get a traffic ticket, right? Like, so we have these ideas or, this misconception, especially under the Trump president, like his whole presidency was based on taking your jobs. I'm sorry to say it, but Americans don't want to work in the fruit fields and pick, it's hard labor from 5 a.m. to 6, 7 p.m. And, you get paid per bag. So you understand, like, you get paid per bag, you get paid per pound, and people can't afford that. And so I can keep going on for hours. But, yeah, that was work I done in Central Valley, and it relates to that as well.
Is that the White House? Chapter 8 is The Divide. And
We were there
this is our
too.
trip to Elko, Nevada together.
So I got
You're
to
to tell the story.
So Ken and I have our own sense of humor driving together, and and I was like, and we were joking like, who they gonna let in? And he's like, dude, I don't think they're gonna let you in. I was like, no, they will let me in.
You have a green card. I'm like, you have a green card.
They're
You're like an Iraqi refugee.
And he was like,
They're not gonna let you in.
because you were like, the security is so tight. And I was like, no. So we showed up, and I think your
But no, we were driving in the car.
Yeah. So
We both
Debating.
applied for credentials.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I'm
we
saying
showed
you're
up.
gonna have
Yeah.
you might have trouble.
Yeah.
We're driving in the car.
Yeah.
I'm driving. It's a 5.5 hour drive up from Elko, Nevada. Wesaam's 3 hours into the drive. Wesaam says, "Oh, I just got an email saying I've been
approved."
credentialed."
Yeah.
I'm like, "I didn't get anything yet." Wait a minute.
Yeah.
And then I think an hour later, I get an email saying, "You have been denied credentials." I'm, what the hell?
Because that article, that Midnight to La Frontera in the Post, I think came out a few weeks back about like you were, so that I think you got on their radar. And
Got on their radar.
yeah.
Again.
So I get in and I look at Ken that like he's trying to get in, and I looked at him. I was like, things are looking up for us, and I just walked back. Then it didn't really. They put us in a cage.
They put him in a cage, which they do at the Trump rallies.
Then we got booed, which I felt honored. I have it on video, right? Because I was like, right. Then they're like, do we have any, black people for Trump? Silent. Brown Mexicans for Trump. And the crowd start looking at me, and I was like, I was like, I am not for him, So I was standing there. But that's the reality that, when you start covering these events. But you were outside having fun.
I was outside. They wouldn't let me in.
Yeah, and they wouldn't let us leave. They're like, no, you can't walk the crowd. You can't do nothing else. You're standing right here. So it wasn't fun. So
I walked the line as people came into the rally. It was an outdoor rally. I walked the line and photographed people, and this is one of the moments. It's in San Francisco, Women's March. And this is every year. There's a big march in San Francisco.
No.
Protest in Berkeley. Chapter 9 is Calamity. On the left is the big march, environmental march in San Francisco, and on the right is Coffee Park, one of the wildfires. Climate protests, homeless evictions in Oakland. And then as I'm photographing, what happens? COVID hits. And this was at the Grand Lake Theater. And then you all may remember when the sky turned red because of wildfires. This is up in Grizzly Peak. This photograph is taken at 10 in the morning. And this is Detroit.
Yeah. I mean, I have a print.
You want to print? Oh, you have a print.
But I want
Thank
a bigger
God.
print. Yeah. But I mean, that speaks volume about America, Like, I mean, to me, it's not a documentary, it's more of an artwork. It's like you got a black man saying freedom, and all those puncture holes would look like, and that's America. The reality is nothing changes. And I've been working a lot in Detroit for the past few years, and it's like one of the most beautiful communities you can work with. Folks are really I'm walking everywhere, but violence in America is not is something we can't really. Journalists tend to shy away from these conversations, but I think this is why this image spoke to me so much, because during that time I seen it, it was a lot of Mario Woods was murdered in the Bay, a lot of the BLM movement shutdowns. So violence still, nothing really changed.
And chapter 10 is the finale. And this is downtown Oakland. And the Lincoln Memorial. And of course, the impeachment protests in San Francisco. Protests in Berkeley. This is a political rally in Richmond during the election. Even Fox News said he won, but And then this is actually Inauguration Day. This is actually up in Sacramento. And so this is just, as I said, the book's 212 photographs. This is just a small sampling of some of the photographs in the book. So we've been photographing the political moment. Yeah, there we are. Thank you, Jared Stapp.
Yeah.
We even credited you.
Yeah. I actually got one of y'all too.
This is us at the DNC. And just to give a little nostalgia, this is my first convention.
Yeah.
That's me on the left in 1972 at the Republican convention in Miami when Nixon was nominated for his second term.
Who took that photo?
Good question. I'd have to go into my archive and look. A friend. Yeah. So we went to the convention. We went to the convention, Wesaam, myself, and Jared as well. It's really interesting. You have to apply. You have to have someone who will vouch for you. You get cleared by the Secret Service. You get a Secret Service pass. And every day you get a pass, like on the left. That's the first day. Yep. And then when you go in, there are various different
floor passes. You got floor.
Yeah,
or
you have
got
every media outlet or every media format has a different place to get credentials. So there's a press photographer's gallery. They're called galleries. A radio gallery, periodical gallery, social media gallery.
Influencers.
Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. And you go through security, and you go in, and to get onto the floor, you turn in your pass on the left, and they give you a floor pass, and then you go onto the floor, and you can photograph on the floor.
Yeah.
And so this was one of my favorite talks at the Republican National Convention, Hulk Hogan. And as Wesaam will say, people ask, how was it? We've talked about this. The Republicans loved us.
Yeah.
The Democrats hated us.
Yeah. That's
it was
a fact.
really like the world turned upside down.
Yeah.
And they just loved. They
loved the they loved journalists. They were very friendly. We'll get to that. But Democrats are like, no. Basically, there is no.
Take the shot and move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, it's not a shot, it's a photograph. Well, whatever, just do it and move.
Yeah. We'll get to that one, but it was not a pleasant experience.
No. And I think one of the problems is, for me at least, was after 4 days, you're photographing the same people over and over and over again, and you get really tired. And so one of the things at the RNC for me that was really interesting was they had many different buildings. They had the convention hall, but then they had 2 other buildings, and they had like a food court with food and vendors selling T-shirts and all that sort of stuff. And one of the vendors, for whatever reason, didn't open, and they had this white vinyl covering over their space. And I'm like, wow, I could be Richard Avedon. And I'm just going to set up right here. And as people, and the light was beautiful. It was shade. And as these nutcases came by in their stuff, I'd say, "Can I take your picture?" And of course, they were more than happy to have their picture taken. And it was really, on the fourth day, it was really fun. Because you're seeing a lot of this, right? And this is like, wow. I mean, I don't know if you can read it. Guns, God, and Trump. And then there's the cross and there's the guns on the left and the right with the American flag. I mean, it's a little bit frightening. And then, of course, every day he came out.
Yeah.
And yes, with the ear, of course. And then the next day, there it is. I mean, I think he would have been smart. He could have sold those ear patches and made money. I don't think he was thinking.
No, because it became a sensation the next day. People would use all kind of products as, really as, sometimes it's so absurd. You just don't want to photograph it. You're like, this is too much.
Here's my little studio. And I think this photograph for me was probably the most poignant moment where, and I don't think you can read his hat, but it's Alabama for Trump. And I'm like, wow, this just took me back to, I don't know, the 50s, and this kid with his shorts and his hat and this shoe shine guy shining shoes. It was just a really pretty incredible moment for me seeing this and making this photograph.
Who's the painting in the backup?
Yeah, I asked. The painter was a very prominent housing advocate in Milwaukee, but those folks there had no idea. They were posting all these Trump things because we read the plaque, and it was like this social activist in Milwaukee that fought for fair housing. And they didn't even
And literally, this picture on the left, I think most of you probably recognize that photograph taken of the assassination attempt, which had happened for eight days before this picture was taken. And all of a sudden, there's this image. You could buy it on T-shirts, and this woman had it on her dress, and just all the paraphernalia. So, as we both agreed, it was just much easier to photograph here, much more open. People said they must have hated the journalists. No, they didn't. They didn't hate us. In fact, at one point, I think Trump said something about mainstream media, and people started booing. And he said, "Oh no, they're really nice to us." No. So. You have to realize the convention floor is like a big, giant TV studio. No. And it's set up that way.
I mean, it's very theatrical.
So Wesaam did a whole different take.
Yeah. So first, I got to thank Mark Merman in the back. I don't know if you guys can see him. Thank you for coming through with the press credentials. My friends know I come out of nowhere, be like, "Can you help me out?" I don't know, so thank you, Mark,
but
for
Mark,
giving me credentials.
Mark is the director of photography at Mother Jones. And so Wesaam would say, "I'm from Mother Jones." You can imagine the Republicans looked at him.
They said, they're like, "Oh, don't talk to him, he's a liberal." And I said, "Huh?" I really did. And few people, I had like a beautiful conversation. I thought we were getting somewhere. And they, "Look, who you work for?" And I said, I'm photographing. My friend got me press pass. They're like, "Oh, no, you work for liberal media." And I was like, psh. And I just like, whatever. I walked off. I was like, "There's too many people to photograph. I don't need you." So this piece was all the personality. I wanted to write an opinion piece. I just became a U.S. citizen, right? So when I went under Trump for the RNC, I had my green card. And during that period of a month in between, I got my U.S. citizenship. And I was like, I'm not going to say nothing because I don't want to start new credentials, and I don't want to miss out. But I was like, so we showed up and there was a lot of foreign media. So I was like, I'm not really stressing it. But for me, it was like his personality, right? This authoritarian, like he have this obsession with authority, and he have this obsession with like the primal father, So I was on the way on the podcast, April was riding with me. I was listening to like Theodore Adorno, and like all these primal father and like the rise of fascism and it's a modern day issue. Then I was trying to be then a lot of conversations happen like he has a Middle East dictator personality, and I was like, nope, he's all American. You know what I mean? Like he's an American problem, like he's an American issue. And I know journalists were not supposed to take sides, but come on, like you gotta speak the truth. And I think sometimes like we're afraid, and I think that's when like documentary journalism work over long periods of time to show you, because sometimes when you're in it, you really just follow the crowd. And sometimes our job as artists or journalists to step back and see this. So this piece was, it's all his personality.
Is this a camera with 50 lenses on it?
No, I had another one that did 3D. Yeah, no, this one was actually little videos and like, painstakingly little ones, and I put them all together. So so that's the first one. Patriotism. So I was trying to look at it from an outsider perspective, like what would America look like to me? And this obsession with being a patriot, right? But when you ask people like what does patriotism look like to you, is Trump. Like not the people, not the country, not doing better for your fellow citizen. It's all about power. Yeah. She was the nicest lady in the world. Trump got my back. So let me be very clear. Everybody was very friendly to me, right? They all knew I was from Nebraska. That guy there,
the guy on the left with the cowboy
on the
hat?
left with the cowboy hat. He's a billionaire from Nebraska. So I met them, and
Wesaam did the whole Nebraska thing. I
Yeah.
can tell you at both conventions. He
Yeah,
was like,
and it worked well.
I'm from Nebraska.
It worked well. So he's a billionaire rancher, and Trump just assigned him to do outreach to the rural America for him. And he came, he's all dancing, and he's like, I'm from Nebraska. He's like, I almost won by 3%. And I was like, well, you didn't get my vote, Really? And I was like, but we can both agree we're both from Nebraska. And he's like, yes. And something about me, I'm not afraid to tell things to people, because when people are like, were you afraid you're going to get hurt? I was like, no, there was Secret Service everywhere. If I sneezed wrong, everything changed. So all these images, I felt bad because a lot of the hallways, nobody there. So this was very theatrical. You can go there and walk through the Oval Office and make phone calls. And people were really sitting there making phone calls, pretending. And I loved it. I think I dragged Jerry. So when I found the place, I dragged all my friends in there. I was like, come look at this. I have another image of a kid got the bottom door open and his hand sticking out. People prayed a lot. It was literally like a religious convention. And there was a time when I asked somebody, I was like, how is this different from the 90s Republican Party? And they're like, this is Trump's party. Then you figure, there was a lot of crosses, a lot of Trump, everything. And this brother right here spent all his money on like a Trump chain. And I said, bring back common sense. And you got Trump. Like sometimes... It's funny, and it ended like that. Yeah. Oh, there was like fabulous outfits with Trump, and that brother. So what happened? They told me no more flash. Okay, so I walk around with a flash. I got no shame, and this person says to me, no more flash. So I waited till the last day, and I was like, you know what? It's the last day. I don't care if you're gonna kick me out. Go ahead. And this was and the media play a role in all of this. Us journalists, sometimes we're not part of the solution, as we like to think it is. And it is all this acknowledgement he's getting, all of this free press he's getting, and nobody's really questioning him. Like nobody really asked him hard questions. When he met with the black journalists in Chicago, NABJ, he was offended. He got a real question finally, right? He, like, explain yourself. And that's pretty much it. And this guy right here, he was sad when we were all left. When we left after it was over, we were walking. Everybody was sad, like it was over, right? Like this.
The Republican Woodstock was over.
It was over, and this guy right here, literally same outfit, 30 minutes apart. He was just walking by himself, looking all sad, And I was like, damn. Like I should say, do you need a hug? But I was like, nope. But it was really sad. And that's the reality we're living with. So, yeah.
And then we went to Chicago for the DNC.
Yeah.
And that was a whole different reality.
Yep.
And they had so many police. I kept saying to them, I wish I had the bicycle concession, because they had, I don't know, over 1,000 police officers on bicycles, which they use as barriers.
Yep.
And this was actually, this was Sunday before the convention started,
Yep.
the first protest
Yep.
downtown
Yep.
by the Trump Tower.
Yep.
And this is the protest. So the protests were relatively small in comparison to what people were projecting or people were telling us. And this is the convention floor.
I gotta interject.
Okay.
It was packed. So
It
let's be
was
very
packed.
clear. The RNC, the first day, second day, if the first two tiers were full, the bottom, because they're all delegates, they were full. Here, it was just too many people. Like, it was just first day, second day, third day, fourth day, it was just jam-packed. And that's what I think there was a lot of problems that we ran into. They said the floor is shut, so.
Well, we'll talk about
yeah,
that.
Yeah.
So one of the differences in terms of reporting and telling the story and photographing, the Republican convention, the delegates were all on the floor. So you can move around the floor it was crowded, as Wesaam said, and the next picture will kind of explain a little bit of that. But at the Democratic convention, the whole setup was completely different. So there were people on the floor, as you can see, but if you look up in the stands, those were delegates. So to go up there and make photographs was really incredibly difficult, because you couldn't have the same way of connecting with people or even photographing them. So it was much, much more difficult. So the space was not as accessible here as it was in Milwaukee. And these TV people, I hate TV people.
Yeah.
They are obnoxious,
Yeah.
totally obnoxious. And you can see they have like 4 people. We're like one person with like 2 cameras at the most. And they have like the producer, the talking head, the camera person. They actually have another person who holds like a monopod when the camera gets too heavy, so they can put the camera in the monopod. And they just like take up the space.
Yep.
And they just will push you.
Well, they had more power than we did. I think there was a hierarchy. Boom, boom, boom. We were in the bottom.
We were at the bottom.
Yeah, sorry to say.
Yeah. And you had to look very hard for this.
Yeah.
Really hard. Where at the RNC, it was every person.
Yeah.
And these are some of Jared's pictures.
Yeah.
Jared, you want to say something?
Come on, Jerry.
Putting you on the spot,
You're
man.
one of the crew too. You were there.
I don't know what to say.
Okay, I'll tell the story about Jared. Jared kind of got bored at the DNC.
No, we found
And
a good spot.
No, that's what I'm going to say. He got bored.
Yeah.
And down in the basement where they had us journalists,
Yeah.
and we'll tell a whole other story about that in a minute. Down in the basement where they had, where you went and got your credentials, and it's literally is the basement of this convention place. If you've ever been in the basement of a convention hall, they have pipes going overhead. They have all types of wires. It's cinder block. It's all white.
Rolling carts with like dirty jerseys.
Right, rolling carts. Right, hockey jerseys, because it's a hockey stadium. So Jared discovered the spot near where the press photographer's gallery was a spot where all the celebrities and important people eventually came through. So Jared staked it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he waited there
Yeah.
for the celebs to come by.
Yeah, the last day for sure.
Yeah.
The last day for sure.
It's like I'm gonna get Beyonce.
Right, Beyonce, who never came.
We were waiting
He was
all
waiting
day.
for Beyonce. And Taylor Swift,
They
right?
shut down the floor.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, all right, I'm gonna hang out.
This is one of our favorite photographs. You gotta love the Democrats. So one of the nice things about Jared, these things are right there, and you just walk by them, and you have to really look really carefully to just find these gems of photograph. So one of the most disturbing parts of the DNC, the Democratic Convention, was this: the influencers and the content creators.
Oh, yeah.
And this is, I was, as someone who's worked as a journalist for almost my whole life, I guess, I have a real belief in the mainstream media and the stories we're trying to tell and the truth. And all of a sudden, we realize that there are these content creators and influencers, 227 of them, that the Democratic Party brought, many of them flown in at the DNC's expense, put in hotels, which they paid.
Catering. We were hungry.
Private room.
We didn't even have water.
And here's Americana, 19. He has 50 million followers. My God, I feel like I have like 10 followers. He has 50 million followers over various social media platforms. What does he do? He dances.
Yep.
That's what he does. He was a former contestant at America's Got Talent, and he said he was surprised to get an invitation to come to the convention,
Yep.
to dance. And as I said, there were 227 content creators and influencers. They produced 7,000 posts, resulting in almost 400 million impressions, which, according to the DNC, said the media value was $800 million. They got to have FaceTime with politicians,
Yep.
a private boat ride on Lake Michigan, tiki bar party, catered rooftop luncheons, exclusive access to 2 private lounges, and a penthouse suite in the convention hall, stocked with free food and alcohol. We're like in the basement.
Yeah.
And 3 of them interviewed the Vice President Kamala Harris, and this was before she did any interviews with the mainstream media. She had not sat down with them. They had a separate box, exclusive box, on the convention floor with a tunnel that they could come in and do their stuff.
We couldn't stand there, right?
And we ended up saying, I spoke to the woman who was kind of running this, and I said, this is a really interesting story. I'd like to get up into the Creators Lounge and take some pictures. And she's like, well, I'll check. And I'll send you a text message. Perfect. Day went by, no text message. I see her the next day. Hey, remember me? I'm doing this story. I want to photograph the Creators Lounge. Actually, I wanted to get free food, but I was. She says, "Oh yeah, right. Well, I'll talk again." And then I get a text message that says, "No journalists allowed in the Creators Lounge." And this is part of one of the spots of the Creators Lounge, which is out on the floor on the second. I guess it would be called the second floor, the floor above where the convention was being held, and you can see the guy on the left holding up the computer with the name of the politician, who none of these people know who that politician is, but the politician is going to be interviewed by one of these creators who knows nothing about politics, but is going to get FaceTime on this person's, 50 million followers, which is what the Democrats wanted. And we were incredibly upset about this, mainly because, what about journalism? This is not journalism. And we all know they want Kamala Harris elected, and we know that. But they're basically bypassing journalism.
Yeah.
And there was a moment in which I'm like, they don't need us anymore.
Mm-hmm.
they know who they have to capture to win the election, and they don't want to talk to the mainstream media because they're going to ask the tough questions where these influencers are.
Well, I mean, my take on it, is that they're very smart, right? They want to reach a whole new generation that none of us speak to, right? Like a lot of people don't buy papers.
I'm speaking to you.
We're there. But, so they're not, these people here for me is not journalism, it's propaganda, right? Like they're not really there to serve, they're not asking questions. And that's it. So in a lot of ways, did the Democrats use them? So that's the question for me as well. Like, did they use them, right? Because even if they gave them whatever, they got their message out. But as journalists, you come with questions and you come with like credibility to fact check what they're saying. These young folks, they were just letting them. And I think we also photographed a bunch of influencers, because they looked real cool. They were like looking different than the rest.
Look cool?
You were cool enough.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that's something I felt like I knew they were being used. Like there is no way. And I don't think that, like from a journalistic perspective, they had the message to push and they got all these young folks to come and work on it for them. But what's their relationship after that with them?
Well, and there's also, for us, the ethical issue. It's not like they flew us in and paid for our hotel and our food. And when that happens, you talk a certain way because you've been bought off, basically, which is, I mean, it's very upsetting, really, really upsetting to me. The last day was really strange, the fourth day.
Do you think, though, that Trump's influence is influencing these handlers, the DNC people? In other words, that was their reaction to the
Well, the RNC also has influences, but they have a much way smaller number than the DNC.
Yeah, I think their influencers at the RNC, they were like far out, And I think with this is they were trying to reach a different spectrum of like all these young people, who are dancing, who are like doing their short videos. So they were just trying to push the message out.
And I think for me, the problem is that they ignored the mainstream media.
Yeah.
We don't need the mainstream media. This is who we need. And that feels very problematic to me.
It sounds like Trump's influencing them more than the RNC. In other words, they're sort of using his same strategy.
Yeah, maybe that could be true.
I mean, they have to get ahead of it. I mean, and the reality is that certain voters already think a certain way, but there's like millions of young voters for the first time coming in. They have to reach that. Like a lot of people, even including I spend so much time on Instagram, have no business being on there, but you're just scrolling looking for something. They want to reach all kind of folks.
So the fourth day, the last day of the convention, we're all kind of exhausted. We're walking around, and I know Wesaam and Jared were in the basement looking for Taylor Swift to show up.
And we got a lot of cool people. We got everybody. I mean, we have a.
I'm really working there. They've become paparazzi.
Actually,
all of a sudden.
No, there was a lot of cool photographers there hanging out with us.
Whatever.
We were sharing the knowledge. Journalists tend to be like, "Shoo, this is my corner." We were like telling everybody, they're like, "Hey, everybody comes through this way," and they're like, "You guys hanging out too long." I was like, "We're not going," because the reason we can't go back on the floor, they kept closing it.
Well, I'm going to tell that. So I'm with my buddy Louis Palou, who's a photographer who photographs a lot in Washington D.C. And he and I go outside to try to find something to eat. And we come back in. We're not on the floor. We have our floor passes, and we decide let's go back on the floor. And all of a sudden, we go to one of the entrances, and they say it's closed.
Yeah.
You can't get on the floor. What do you mean it's closed? Well, the Secret Service says we can't let journalists in. Oh, really? And then Louis and I say, let's go to another entrance. Maybe they don't know, right? We're good journalists, right? Isn't that what you do? Try to find the back door to get in. So we go to another door. We show our credentials. Mm-hmm. No, you can't come in. No journalists on the floor. Why? The fire marshal says there's too many people. Yeah. We're like, okay, let's go around the other side of the building to another entrance. We go to the other entrance. Can we get on the floor? No, they're not letting any journalists on the floor because they're worried there's going to be protesters.
Yeah.
So we're like, what the hell? Now, if you were on the floor already working, you could stay on the floor. But if you leave the floor, you couldn't get back on. And if you hadn't been on the floor and you wanted to get on, they were not allowing you.
But
So
delegates
it was
can go
closed
in
for
and out.
like an hour and a half or so. And so Louis and I decide, let's go to the entrance we've been using all along. And so we go to this entrance, and it was interesting. The security at the DNC was just like secure. It must have been union stuff with security guards who I guess work in the center where the convention was held. In the RNC, it was Secret Service agents,
Chase United Center.
and the Chase Center was
Was it
Secret
United?
Service agents and
United,
police
yeah.
officers at all the entrances. At the DNC, it was just volunteers and security people. So we go there, and we say, we want to go on the floor, and the security guard says, the floor is closed, you can't get on. And there's a big black curtain, and he pulls the curtain. So I'm like, wow, that's the shot, right? The curtain being closed, they're not allowing journalists on. So I start to take a picture, and there I am on the left. And of course, the best picture is the hand in front of the camera, right? And he says, you can't take my picture. And I hate to say, I went ballistic. And my friend Louis is filming the whole thing. He's like, Ken, this is the best footage I've ever gotten. And I'm really like, I'm yelling at this guy. This isn't Russia. I can take your picture. And then someone else says, he's just doing his job. And it's like, what do you mean? Don't you believe in the freedom of the press?
These are all journalists.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these are all journalists around here. And this is actually taken by a woman photographer who's inside on the other side of the curtain.
We made friends with. That's how we found this for a year. Because remember, she was
Yeah, it
standing
was
next
on-
to us. Yeah, on Instagram.
And it was
she
on
posted it.
Instagram.
And I was like, oh, that's Ken. Because I got a text message from you. I got in a fight, and I was like, oh, I was like, snap, we gotta go. I thought it was that kind, like Then we heard about it, and we were right around the corner, like few doors down.
And this is, again, the last day. The balloons come down. The flags go up. I mean, one of the really interesting things I thought about the DNC was they took back the flag.
Yep. Yeah.
And I think that for too long, people look at the flag and think of the Republicans, but at the conventions, the Democrats decided they're going to take back the flag, and they also are going to take back fight.
Yep. Well, during the RNC, there were not many American flags. I mean, I saw few people had clear backpacks, but then none were waving throughout the whole time. It was Trump, Common Sense, anything, was it fire Joe Biden? It was the four main ones that being. But I think the Democrats were smart. They were like every day they had a brand new signs going up, flags going up, and I think they saved that for the last day because I think it was like claiming it back.
And there's nothing like being in a balloon drop. These balloons were so big. I mean, it was crazy. And one of my favorite pictures, I'm not showing it, is a Secret Service agent standing there surrounded by balloons. And he's being a Secret Service agent, so he's very stern. He's looking really serious. But all these balloons are just surrounding him. And that was at the DNC. And at the RNC, my favorite balloon shot was I was standing by the Texas delegation. And many of you know the governor of Texas is in a wheelchair. So he's on the floor in the wheelchair. And you can imagine all the balloons around him. And all you see is his head sticking out of the balloons.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our experience. Yeah. And I hope there's some questions that some of you have.
Yeah.
And we have a mic. And I might add, my books are for sale back there. That's my commercial announcement. And we have 2 mics. If you have questions, we're happy to try to answer them.
Oh, right here. We can hear you.
I was just very interested in the image of the from the Eugene Debs
Yes.
quote, which I'm familiar with.
Yes.
And I was wondering whether in that context, you imagined that your politics were in some sense, completely different from the politics that you're representing in the images in the DNC and the RNC, because that's a totally different understanding of American life and American history in that photograph, of the Debs tattoo.
Yeah, I mean, the Debs, I mean, of course I know Eugene Debs, and you see that and you're like, wow. First of all, who would put a Eugene Debs quote, that big quote, on their back? Right there was something really, really fascinating. And, the difference between photographing across America and going into a convention, you go to a convention and you know that a convention is kind of, like I said, it's a TV studio, and it's completely scripted.
Yeah.
Completely scripted. And they give you a script and they say at this time this is happening and so forth. In fact, the first day Joe Biden was supposed to talk and they were so slow, they kicked out James Taylor, who was supposed to play, so Biden can talk, because it was like 11 at night. And it's like, I think Biden goes to sleep like at 8:30. So I don't know how he stayed up till 11. But it's completely scripted. And they have people come out constantly for 15 minutes. And all the signs you're seeing, they
had
pass out.
volunteers. Yep.
They have volunteers,
Clockwork.
and they come out like clockwork, and they go on all the aisles. And this is in both conventions. And they give them the signs. And in fact, I remember at one point, a woman held up the sign, and the aisle person said, "No,
Not yet.
you have to wait, not yet." So it's both conventions are completely curated, I guess is how I would describe it. And then that becomes more difficult, I think, to make pictures, to figure out how you get beyond the script that they're wanting you to photograph. And most of the photographers are following the script.
Yeah.
That's the scary thing.
that was
Like
the
the
fight.
AP,
Yeah.
the AP photographers, the Reuters photographers, the magazine photographers, they're all following the script, and they're getting the pictures, that their editors expect them to get, and they're not going down into the basement looking for Taylor Swift.
Yeah. Yep.
And
So
PBS does the same thing, yes. So the three of us, I think, are trying to find those moments that these other photographers aren't looking at. And then, of course, one of the problems is, in the modern era, the courtesy that used to be there if you were taking a picture has disappeared among young photographers.
Hey.
So you might be waiting for the right moment, and all of a sudden a young photographer will come right in front of you. And it's like, what the hell? And they look, oh, I didn't see you. And there you are with two cameras and your press passes. Or they come behind you, you're waiting, and they see what you're seeing.
Yep.
And
That's normal.
right?
Well,
And they're going to take the picture. And the courtesy of I saw it, I'm waiting, I'm taking that's
No.
kind of disappeared,
No.
right?
Yeah. No. So two things for us young folks in defense. When
Are you talking about yourself,
no,
young?
no. So I was photographing that Nebraska guy, right?
Yes, the cowboy guy.
The cowboy guy, and Bruce Gilden get right in front of me, right? And psh, right? And I was like, all right, hold on. So I wait for him to turn around, and I do the same thing to him. Then at the end, we became friends because of that, because I kept seeing him everywhere, and I would do it to him, RNC and DNC. And he's like, hey, we got it, But yeah, that was it. The problem was, for me at the DNC, and I think we stayed out, is that they closed the floor on us, and they're like, you have to kneel down, pop up, take your pictures, kneel down. Like they were like in a war, you shoot, you get back. And I was like, I can't do that. My shins are burning. So some people complained when journalists are like, look, I can't do this. I got to get off the floor. So it became a big problem. The director in charge of the DNC came and is like, I hear you, we see you, we acknowledge your problem, we're gonna fix it tomorrow. Everybody was happy, right? Next day we came off, everything was roped off. So now what we have to do is stand in line, right? So stand on the right side, the stage is in the center, you come in, you take your photos, and you leave. So it's like, you're like, boom, boom, boom. But I was like,
Take your shot.
yeah, and I did meet a photographer from Chicago. He's like, you want my spot? I was like, no. But journalists are real friendly, but at the same time, it was like, they didn't give you a lot. So one day I went back with an infrared camera, and I just photographed with an infrared camera. I was like, because you're not really missing out. Then I took a different camera, because everything looks the same. Like you covered it for long enough to look for little nuances, but we were like, if somebody sneezed, I mean, I had images. I don't want to hit on other photographers or us in general journalists. There was one guy with a hat, and I stood behind him to photograph, and there was every journalist, right? That photo of shame. And I made eye contact with few of them, and they looked away. They knew I knew what they were doing, because sometimes that's a problem with journalists. It's like we want. And it's not their fault. It's like the editor want a certain image, and you have to do that. But I think doing documentary, you have your own, like time to work on the stories, and I think that's an important thing. Like editors should give people more time. Mark was cool. He didn't bother me at all. Just for the record. Yeah. Hi.
Sorry, just since people hear differently, we'll wait for the mic.
Yeah. Sorry.
This is a selfish question, but where can I and I show other people the convention photographs and some of the ones you talked about that aren't there? Do we have to wait for a book, or is there someplace more?
No, I'm not there on a book yet. But what it is, I mean, I put most of the things like daily on my Instagram, but like the DNC, I didn't show anything because I'm still working through it because it's massive. But yeah, like on my Instagram, I put some of those images, my first name, last name. Without the hyphen.
I'm just putting mine in the archive right now to figure out how. I'm waiting to see what happens and how it all fits. What's the puzzle?
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out the puzzle. I think like we all are. Next book.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I was just hoping that you would make a quick book on the two of the conventions side by side and put in a little information about people who didn't take civics to give them a little clue.
Ooh.
Because that would be very helpful to the younger generation and the people who are like old and kind of getting disappointed.
Yep. Yep. Oh, yeah.
Hi. There's an aspect of journalism that we're not talking about because you guys are photographers, and I salute you for what you do and your insight. Is there anybody, and I'm not talking about his warts, but is there anybody who is writing about politics and went to both conventions that is doing something that Mailer might have done, or
A good question.
that is catching this confection is what the DNC was, and I was impressed and moved at times, but it was clearly a confection. And it's important to rip that off so that people are able to have a civics lesson. Because, bring back democracy, fight for democracy, that's not what democracy looks like.
It's a good question. I think part of it may be that, as Wesaam said, a lot of the journalists have deadlines. Their editors expect them to write a certain type of story, and they're not necessarily looking at the bigger picture. Although, the New York Times wrote about the influencers. They were not the first one. They followed, I think, NPR was one of the early ones, and there was another, I can't remember the magazine, wrote about it. And then what happens in the media, they all see the same story, and then they all start writing about it. So I hope someone will write something like Mailer. Yeah, it's really important, like you said. Yeah.
Ken, I
Yeah.
share your cynicism about the influencers, but I'm sure that was a very calculated strategy to get those people there. They've got followers, which means voters. They've got the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we may look back on this as those people being hugely influential in delivering the outcome that I suspect most of the people in this room would want.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Bob. But the part that, annoys me is that the mainstream media, I mean, here we are at a journalism school, and we're training journalists, and what the DNC is saying, we don't need journalists anymore. We need numbers and the influencers.
Yep.
And they should be able to do both. But they figured out that it's smarter not to talk to journalists, because someone might say something they shouldn't say
Yep.
in a moment of truth, and it gets reported and it creates problems. So let's just talk to the influencers, because they don't know anything about politics, and they're just going to dance. And
Yeah. And I want to,
You know, and I'm happy that Taylor Swift came out and how many
Yeah.
people registered to vote. It's incredible, right? It's incredible. She maybe is the most important influencer. And that's why these guys were waiting down in the basement hoping she'd show up.
they wouldn't let, see,
Yes.
yeah. But look, it's very, they have their own media team, they have their own strategists. That's smart. And two, not every politician can speak well. I mean, let's just be realistic, you know, like not everybody in front of a camera, in front of a mic can deliver a message. Some people say the wrong thing. They're like, oop. So that's why they were trying to avoid that. And if you like, I have nieces who are turning 18, you know, probably going to be a first time voter, right? They're not listening to me. You know, like, Uncle Wesaam, you're lame. You know, like you just do this. But what they're looking for, you know, they know that kid that does all that dance moves. You can't be mad at them because we're gonna look back and people gonna say, oh, those old heads, you know, like these ones just think a certain way. And it is important. Like the Democrats trying to win this by, like, I would say, any positive means necessary, right? And they're trying to put their best forward. And these young people would bring them, like, look around us. Look at the crowd, right? Like there's a certain age demographic here, right? Like there's a certain one. They're trying to reach a different one. And I think both can coexist, right? We just saying journalists should be respected for our profession and for the work we're doing. And politicians want to avoid us, like, oh, I don't want to talk to you. And I was like, can I take your picture? You know? And we get it, and we did that. And for us being in the basement, let me be very clear. We photographed Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Oprah, Elizabeth Warren you did a selfie with. So we photographed everybody's celebrity.
We're not showing any Jared selfies.
Yeah.
All of a sudden he became like, I'm going to take a selfie with all these people.
Yeah, and they were cool about it. You know, we got Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Pete. The Obamas on stage. So we photographed everybody, but I have a funny Hillary story, right? So I met this photographer friend from Germany. We went to get coffee. We were walking back, and I see all these people with Secret Service walking by. And I was like, she's not tall, you know? And I was like, oh, it's Hillary. So, you know, if you know me personally, I was like, oh, shit. You know, so I start turning around, and I start walking with her entourage, right? Trying to set up my camera. And I got by the elevator, and my flash didn't go off. And I was like, dang it, you know? So then she came back the next day, and it worked. And they were not mean, you know? They were not like, hey, don't come near us. Except one photographer was like a football player. Like, and I was like, dude, get out the way. You know, she worked for Bill Clinton, and she's like, you guys can't take photos. And I was like, psh. You know, if they're in my site, I'm taking a photo. So I think it was a great experience for us. I know Lou was like, oh, I see them all the time. I was like, no, not us. We don't see them all the time. Right. And I'm really grateful because you said, like, that's the spot. And I was like, I'm just hanging out here. So, yeah.
Hi. I have two questions, one for Ken and one for Wesaam.
Yeah.
Ken, you photographed your first RNC at Nixon's second election. How subjectively has it changed, the RNC specifically, and maybe American culture broadly, from the Nixon years to now, this RNC? Like, what was different about it, other than the obvious, influencers and the way media has changed?
Access. So in 1972, I traveled with Richard Nixon in Ohio in, I think it was 8 different cities. And you could be this close to him. Today, forget it. I mean, the security and the ability for access has just completely changed. And I think it's just not in politics, it's pretty much the whole world. I mean, I did in the 70s, late 70s, I photographed industrial workers for many years. And I could just go to a factory, I'm doing a project, oh, sure, and they just let me in, and I just walk around, and I take pictures. 3 years ago, I got a Guggenheim Fellowship, and I went to Pennsylvania to photograph the U.S. Steel plant as part of my project that I was doing. I had 6 people behind me, following behind me. And you can imagine to photograph with 6 people behind you, they're like, what are you waiting for? Let's go on. And it just completely changes your relationship to the people that you want to photograph. And so I think with politics, it's just completely changed. And with both conventions, I know they had certain groups of photographers who are anointed that they want to make sure they're close enough. The New York Times, the New Yorker magazine, the LA Times. I mean, there's Associated Press. There's a small group of photographers, and they are kind of become the elite photographers. I mean, they're all doing news photographs. And then there's the rest of us. And, to try to get the access they have can be really, really difficult. So I would say what's really changed is the access. And of course, the whole tenure of politics. I mean, we hated Nixon. Now we look at Nixon and think he's like a liberal, right?
Yeah.
Well,
your second question.
come on, the EPA,
Yeah.
And for Wesaam, I'm also Arab American, and I was just curious about you mentioned earlier how people try to paint the label of Trump as like a copycat of an Arab dictator, and you said it's an American problem. Can you just talk a little bit more about
Well,
what you mean
I
by that?
think with the Middle East, when they ever think of something, like when they ever want to attribute something negative to anywhere, they're like, oh, it's the Middle East, like Arab leaders, Arab dictators, right? And I don't think that is. I think he is an American problem. He's manifested here. He's part of this culture, and he's speaking to that culture, right? And that's what I meant by that. That's my point, and I always speak about it, because you can't really see everything bad. You're like, oh, over there, they're not like, you know what I mean? Like, they're not there. They haven't reached the intellectual peak yet, This homie reached the intellectual peak and is a representation of this country in some ways. So, and we have to be, you can speak freely about it here with him, especially I can say what I want about him, And yeah, so you know where my politics stand on that issue in particular. And I think it's more important than ever for people, this is a serious matter. Look, I know a lot of folks here live in California, live in the Bay. You live in your own bubble. But I live in the Midwest, right? And that whole world is completely different. And within my own family, right, I have some people who think I'm crazy for speaking about women's rights, right? And they're my white side of the family. Let me be very clear, right? Because we've been here, my brother's married, so those other sides of the family, for them to keep their identity, they became real crazy Republicans about certain issues. And my whole Arab family is very blue. So it's like this divide, certain things people don't understand. These come home, and I'm trying to have conversations with my nieces about these political issues. You need to understand these have long-term effects, these things, and it's in people's families now. And I think when it affects the conversation at the dinner table, or you're sitting on the ground having dinner, it's a problem. And I think on us journalists, as people, how do you come together and how do you make this better for the next generation? I was working in Standing Rocks years back, and an old man says, we're living on borrowed land from the youth, right? We're borrowing everything else from the next generation. And it's on us adults. What are we going to hand over? I mean, you can't just, like Howard Zinn said, you can't be neutral in a moving train. You can't be in these situations, just standing there looking like, I wish I could have voted, but, I couldn't. This is a serious matter, right? And I'm not trying to persuade people which way to vote. I know what but it's an important date, and I think that's it. That's what it's important to me when I compare them to. No, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yes?
Hi. Okay, 2 questions. Wesaam, I am curious about, because you are very strongly rooted in your practice as a multimedia visual artist. And for some of the students that are here tonight, what did you learn here at the J School that you take into your practice? So can you talk about that?
I need my money back. No. No, actually.
We're writing a check for you right now.
No, actually, to be honest, it's one of the best decisions I made because I came from the San Francisco Art Institute. You know, we have a very strong history of photography. I studied with Linda, with Janet. You know, there's a lot of great people here. And if I can't see you, you know. But I come from the photograph is not the truth, right? Like, you know, it's a truth, but not the whole truth, right? It sounds religious, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's ephemeral. But when you come to the journalism school and you studied with Ken and I think I gravitated toward you even before I came here. Judy Walgren, I believe, is the one who introduced me to you at a Photo Alliance event. Somebody walked me over, and you know, I was like, hey man. But I think the thing with the J School in particular, right? It really makes journalists. I'm a snob when it comes to Berkeley because I meet people from like Stanford, Columbia, and I was like, you ain't shit, you know? And that's the truth is because we make like journalists who can go out into the world and do everything on their own, right? Like wherever we go, we can put a whole story together, right? Like, and you have a network. Like I'm still reaching out to everybody in the school. People graduated years ahead of me. So you have really a sense of family. I think that's an important, and this place in particular, and a lot of people came here. You can be a journalist and artist at the same time, and you can, you know, they can both coexist. And I think this is the spot for the other programs. They're like, no, you're gonna do film, and I was like, nope, you know, because they're trying to get me here to do text, and I was like, no, I'll stick to photos. But here you can be free, right? Here I think you get the tools. I think you get the faculty, because I mean, just to be real. Even though he's my friend, like getting access to 5 decades of knowledge, you know, like on speed dial. He get questions from me all the time about journalism. That's what Berkeley offers you. And I am not really selling you the school, just to be very clear. But that's what my experience, and, you know, Mark is there. Who else went to the J school? And I reach out every time I need help. April, you're always there. Krista Warren right there, you know. Bob, yeah, but there's a whole network of people, and I'm sorry I didn't point you out if you're ahead of me or before me, but everybody still look out for one another. And I still have a lot of my friends here that I made in the photojournalism, you know. I got a shout out to Jake. I know he's shy. Jake Ricker there, one of the best journalists, photographers, I'm sorry, you know, best photographers I know. But that's the friends you make here, Charlie, Taylor. I mean, this is Berkeley. I know the community we have here, and that's why I said this is not going to be formal, because you have a lot of these people. Lewis, yeah. So, but yeah, there's a lot of beautiful folks here.
Okay, Ken, this question is for you. I remember when you first became Wesaam's mentor, and he was so excited, and I actually met you at his wedding. So my question for you is, after mentoring Wesaam for so many years and, you know, watching his talent grow, what have you learned from Wesaam?
That's a setup. What have I learned from Wesaam? You know, Wesaam has a very interesting way of looking at the world. And I think that I've learned that from him.
I mean,
you know, how he sees the world, how he thinks about it. And like I said at the very beginning, we literally speak on the phone almost every day. It's pretty crazy.
She gets a
well,
phone
April,
call
you
too.
get the same calls.
Look, I come from the Midwest. I check in on everybody. I mean, there's a lot of y'all here.
We check in on each other.
Yeah, and I text everybody. You have to. These are your people, you know? I think artists, sometimes we get locked in our ideas, and like, you know, the later on in life, you're like, huh? You know, I try to come out here and make time and see people.
Half of the audience is Wesaam's friends, right?
And new friends, too.
New friends.
Yeah.
I had a question. I feel like I'm gonna bring the mood down after that lovely little interaction. I hear you on the mainstream media and the influencers, and it doesn't have to be an either or. And I think the mainstream media has done a better job of meeting this moment in election. But I wonder if it's, I can sort of see how the Harris campaign finds it a little irrelevant because it's a sort of asymmetrical war, right? Like one person is sort of serious, the other isn't. One person is being held, their feet held to the fire, like, what's your plan? How are you going to pay for it? The other is, but it doesn't, the answers are irrelevant. And I know this is a little bit outside of your realm as photojournalists, but you've been covering these elections. I guess I'm wondering, like, do you think mainstream media has been meeting this moment in a way that feels sort of ethical and fair to both sides? Or and maybe they have a reason for not, unfortunately, not wanting to engage, because engagement does feel unfair. And I don't know whose fault that is. I'm not saying it's about the mainstream media being at fault. But the game has been scrambled, and I don't know that they've totally met the moment yet.
Yeah, I think the game has been scrambled. And I think, one of the problems we've talked a lot about in journalism is how, in some way, I think the mainstream media is happy Donald Trump is running again because it's airtime and conversations and craziness. And it's like watching a reality TV show rather than watching a political campaign. And that, I don't think they know how to even deal with it.
Yep.
Which is a problem. I don't know if I'm answering your question or not. Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Right. It's two separate games.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, he has his own.
He's
He has his own. He has his own reality TV program.
Yep. Look.
Yeah. Yes, it is concerning.
No.
Yeah.
I want to add to that. I think journalism needs to do a lot of reflection, right? I think there is the good ones, but that we don't see. But like what I mean, majority of America get their information from television, right? And get their information. We already decided who's a clown, and we already decided who should be the next leader. And I think journalists and another way journalists are not asking questions anymore, right? Like they like I always say, the old ways of, was it Walter Cronkite? You had few news stations, and they hold people accountable and all of that, right? When I came to the school, I thought everybody got a newspaper under their armpit and we're gonna read the paper. No, really, I was that naive, right? Like you think that's right, and that's something I think journalism need to do a lot of, cleaning up or reflecting within, because I think the rest of the country relies on you. When you go to a doctor, right, you expect, to find out what's wrong. When you go to a mechanic, you expect the thing. Certain things you expect people have a lot of trust in journalism, right? But when certain institutions sit here, when I was in school, and say our obligations is to our reader base, right? But who's your reader base? Liberals, right? Like people like a lot of folks in here who think a certain way, so we're gonna publish a certain way. So journalism has look, I love journalism. I work in that field, but we have a lot of questioning, and we need some sort of a UN form kind of thing. Look, this is not right. And it's true. Like Trump, yeah, they love Trump because he gets a lot of free airtime, but he also get their news, all the ratings they want. So it's like this unholy marriage, this unholy relationship between them that they know is not great for the long term.
I think we're going to take one more question.
Oh, who's going to be it? Oh, damn it. Oh, snaps.
Hey. So I was, just to kind of continue what you were talking about, Sam, we've had a conversation about what photographs are capable of, essentially, especially in journalism. John Charkowski said that photographs didn't tell the truth; they make things real. But we live in the age of AI as well, and so this is actually for both of you. So I'm wondering, each of us kind of makes our own decision about what we think the potential for photographs to, you know, when we put them out into the world, what they do, what their function is. So what do you guys think, you know, photography's potential is when you're doing this work to convince, is it just to show, to, you know, to demonstrate this is what's happening? You know, what are you guys thinking when you're making these photographs, when you're selecting them, when you're showing them? You know, is there a limit for photographs to convince or tell anything that might change people's minds?
Well, I think we're working in a whole different realm than a lot of the photographers. And a lot of the photographers are, you know, they're working for the Associated Press. I mean, their pictures are going in newspapers, in magazines, online. And I think we're, well, I'll talk for myself, but I think the same with Wesaam. We're kind of witnessing. Someone said it would be great if we could see all the pictures now. And I'm kind of more interested in the long term and the idea that there's history and you have to figure out what that history is and how it fits together, and the need to look back. So like one of the books outside, this is my pitch to buy books. One of my books outside is called What's Going On. It's my earliest pictures from 69 to 74, when I was a young photographer starting at 19 years old, photographing with no idea of what, I mean, just photographing the world around me and the stories, and somehow it eventually all fit together to tell the story of that era. And you can look back at those pictures, and you can understand what the world was and how it informs us going forward. And so I'm not so interested in, like, you know, yes, I was there and here are the pictures and I move on. I think it's about trying to figure out something that's bigger, a bigger story, and how does it all fit together? And I'm not even sure. I just know, and I think all three of us felt like we had to go there.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but we had to go there. Yeah. And the fact that we have access and we could get access and we could be there, you know, what are we going to do with the pictures? You know, I mean, Wesaam worked with Mark and Mother Jones, and Mother Jones, I think, used a few of the pictures.
No.
None. Yeah. They haven't run any of them. But it doesn't matter to Wesaam. No, it doesn't matter because he has the pictures. Or to Jared or to me. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The fact that we were there and we could see it in a certain way, and I think we all know at some point the pictures will be out somehow in the world or in an archive that people can find and see a different way of looking at what happened. I don't know if that answers your question.
I'll answer you from my way of perspective, Annie. I think daily press photographers have a deadline to meet, right? Like, so it's not, they make the best images, but for us who work on long-term photo projects, I think we have a cultural and a moral obligation, right, to document what we see like how history, and it will become history, right? Like the present will become history. And I think as you grow as a person and as we grow as a society and as a culture, then you understand the significant meaning of those photographs. So sometimes you have to sit, and I think that's a page out of your playbook, like just sit it, you know, just wait it out, because you never know what's going to happen. And for me, I think that's what I wanted to be part of history, right? Because I was like, can I get it? Can I get in? And I was not expecting, like when I reached out to Mark, I wasn't expecting the work to be published. I was asking for a favor because you need some sort of magazine, right? Like some sort of, but for me, just to experience that, right? It had an impact. And I promise you, I don't ever want to do another convention. I learned that. I was like, I'm done, you know, because it's a lot, you know, 8 days of work, you know, no matter how much you kept with the best of us. I was going to sleep every night. My legs hurt, you know, and we were like, man, Ken is.
Yeah. At 11:30 when we got back from photographing, it's like, let's go out and have a drink.
And I was like,
He's
no,
like,
I'm
no,
tired.
no, you have to come. Come on.
Yeah.
I'm buying.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, we're going then. But it was beautiful. But it's like you have to be there, right? Because it's impossible to get 40,000 people in a space who are willing to let you photograph them. Like, you know, and everybody was there. But in my mind, like, you know, I knew it was like performative, it's theatrical, you know, it's a stage, right? And I wanted to photograph it that way because that was my piece was supposed to be about. Then I was like, I just became a citizen a month ago. I should quit poking. You know what I mean? Like, just wait it out. You're not in a hurry to write an opinion piece. So,
and remember, the other thing is, a lot of the photographers don't own their own pictures, and they don't control their pictures. So, you know, they're employees, and so those pictures are controlled by the organizations that have, you know, pay them. But we own our pictures, and we control our pictures, and we can decide where those pictures go, where they don't go, what, you know, how we edit them. I mean, if you saw, we didn't take a picture, but if you saw the room where the editors were, which was in the basement, it was a huge room, and they're all sitting in front of computers, and there's probably 75 of them, and they're all working for the major media, and they have runners who take the cards from the cameras and run down to Judy Smiling, because she was director of photography at the Chronicle, she knows, and they would run down and put it in the computer, and they'd edit, and they'd send that picture, you know, to wherever it was going. And a lot of times the photographers don't even see their own pictures or have any sense of what the picture's about, where we're the opposite. We own what we've done, and which is really important. Yeah. Thank you for coming tonight.
thank you all.
We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
And there's books for sale back there. Take out your credit card and buy a book.
100% of the proceeds go to Ken.
You're into homo